Second service, how we doing? Fantastic. It's good to be with you. So this week, every week I try to come, I've been thinking about something, and this week, here's what I've been thinking about. Maybe you have too. Inflation, yeah. And, I know we've all spent plenty of time complaining about gas prices and, blaming somebody in politics, why inflation, all of that, that's great. But this week, inflation, here's where I've been feeling inflation the most. It's not gas price, it's not grocery price, it's at restaurants. This is where I'm starting to get a little grumpy. I'm just going to be honest with you. This last week, some of our staff, we all went out to a local place downtown. And I just got like a combo, like nothing fancy. I didn't add anything. I didn't take anything away. Just combo meal, entree, fries, drink. $22. And then here's, I know, I'm gonna complain for a minute. And then here's, how they like, okay, now we just have a question to ask you. And I'm like, that's a sweet way of saying I want more money. And so it was, and this is a limited service restaurant. Like basically they don't really do anything. And so they flip it over, and you know how oftentimes there's options. It's like 15%, 18%, 20%, something like that, or custom tip. And this one, though, skipped 15 and 18%. It was 20, 25, or 28%. And I was like, I'm a pretty generous guy. 28% for doing that. I was like, But here, listen, a lot more people know who I am than I know who they are. And every once in a while, people look at me like I should know them. And I'm like, I'm going to have to do the 28%. Or I'm going to be the pastor that's the cheap tipper, right? So I'm like, golly, right? So I wanted to know just how much restaurants have increased. So I actually looked up the data. And so here's menu price increases over the last year. So limited service restaurants, which they might do a little like take your order, but that's about it. Prices have gone up like 7.2% on average, right? Full service restaurants, 9% increase. And then I wanted to know, well, who's the worst offender? Like, who's really gouging me? Where am I going to boycott next? So for those of you that drink coffee, I'm sorry. Starbucks, corporate villain right here. No, that's my teenage daughter. Do you guys have teenage daughters that want to go to Starbucks 3 times a day or something like that? And yeah. So 20% increase. So for example, last year a Venti large coffee was $2.45. This year it's $2.95. So that's what a 20% increase. And my teenage daughter doesn't drink black coffee, so you can imagine those numbers aren't 2, it's more like 5, right, for a drink. So here's this is why my youngest daughter doesn't get any more chicken nuggets. 14% your Big Mac is not just slowing your heart, it's thinning your wallet, right? That's what's happening here. And then this one is this hit home. This one was personal. Chipotle was number 3. Listen, I love a burrito bowl for lunch, like love it a lot. And I've actually, because as the prices just keep going up, our family goes there, it's like $60, right? For a family of 4. I'm like, are you kidding me? I thought, you know what? I've told Katie this. I'm going to get a side hustle job here. Because not only will I just want to do like the lunch rush. Let's just do that. The lunch, $16 an hour. But here's where the real gold comes in. The free bowl I get after, right? That at this point is becoming priceless to me. So, but here's the thing. Again, I go down weird rabbit trails when I'm thinking about stuff to talk to you guys about. And so I was down this rabbit hole of, expensive food. We're not touching the surface at a burrito bowl at 8%. Did you know? The most expensive entree on the planet, $25,000. And it's a taco. The Grand Vilas Taco in Mexico, right? I mean, tacos go at $1.25. 25. It's got Kobe beef, of course. It's got Almas beluga caviar. I had to look that up. It's not just caviar. It's like fancy caviar. Like there's caviar is fancy, but then there's like fancy caviar. This is only found in the most pristine waters of the Caspian Sea off the coast of Iran. Okay, right? $300 an ounce for this. Also, it's got black truffle brie cheese. And did you know, here's what I learned this week, did you know that truffles, pound for pound, are the most expensive food on planet Earth? And then, of course, the tortilla. That is not just a corn tortilla. That's gold flake infused corn tortilla. But here's where you really are spending your 25 grand. This comes with a salsa. That's got just, some chilies. But then for a little liquid in there, it's this, it's called Ley 925 tequila. This bottle of tequila, and this actually isn't the actual bottle that's $3.5 million, but there's a bottle of tequila that goes for $3.5 million. It's 2.5 pounds of platinum lined with 325 diamonds, right? And so they pour a little of that tequila in your salsa, and here's where you really earn your money, $25,000. This salsa is topped with what's called civet coffee beans. Now, here's the thing about civet coffee. It comes from the poop of a civet cat. Because apparently the process, whatever's happening in this civet cat, it's enhancing the coffee flavor. So for $25,000, you get a taco with a gold tortilla and poop salsa. I'm a burger guy now. That's what I'm just a burger guy. Although burgers, you may not know this, the most expensive burger in the world costs you $5,000, right? But here's the thing with this burger, it's got, all the, the Wagyu beef. I'm not sure how to pronounce, is it foie gras, right? The duck and goose liver. It's got truffles, again, pound for pound, the most expensive thing in the bottle, right? All of that kind of stuff. But here's where $4 of the $5,000 for this burger comes from. That bottle of wine you see served with it is it's a 1995 Petrus. It goes for $4,000 a bottle, and you get the bottle when you order the burger. And if you're like me and you like to top off dinner with a nice little dessert, the Golden Opulence Sundae, rocking you a grand for that sucker, right? Tahitian vanilla ice cream covered in 23-karat gold leaf, almonds, caviar. I do not want caviar with my ice cream. That is not how I operate. There's a sugar-forged orchid in there that's hand done. It takes 8 hours to build. It takes 8 hours to build that orchid, right? You get the glass, it's just this whole serious kind of situation with vanilla beans from Madagascar and candied fruit from Paris. It's a situation, but $1,000 for your after your $25,000 taco, you can, chase it with $1,000 sundae. So, but here's the thing, we, in our sort of, contemporary world, modern age, we didn't really invent sort of extravagant dining. 2,000 years ago when, Jesus of Nazareth was running around, the Roman Empire was kind of ruling the known world at the time, and the Roman elites, the emperors, sort of the one percenters, they are known for their extravagant dinner parties. In fact, some history records that some of the dinner parties thrown by the wealthiest in the Roman Empire would cost around between $10 and $15 million for one dinner party, like our $10 or $15 million for one dinner party. They would love to have a mixture of peas and rice with gold flakes, and they'd smash pearls. And so you'd be eating gold and pearl infused pea and rice dish. Some of the most expensive dishes 2,000 years ago: pheasant, raw oysters, lobsters, shellfish, venison, boar, peacock. One Roman emperor, we actually have some surviving dinner party menus from 2,000 years ago or so. One Roman emperor, Elagabalus, he had a menu that featured camel's feet, tasty, honeyed dormice, brains of ostriches, eels, caviar from fish caught by the emperor's own private fleet. For the Roman elite, it was all about the rarity of the food, how hard it was to get the food, and of course, the cost of the food. Other Roman elites, other surviving menus from that era include like livers of fish, tongues of flamingos, brains of peacocks, right? All of these kinds of really weird, bizarre, extravagant dishes that were very, very expensive. And here's what's interesting to me. While all of this is going on, primarily in the urban centers of the Roman Empire, there's a Jewish rabbi named Jesus of Nazareth who's running around in the northern part of Israel, a rural area known as the Galilee. It's sort of bordered what was called the Sea of Galilee, a large lake in the region. Jesus of Nazareth, the Jewish rabbi, this is where he's running around. And he ate just like everybody else. But instead of, flamingo tongue and camel feet and this extravagance and millions of dollars, Jesus of Nazareth's primary meal was fish from the Sea of Galilee, a tilapia. Today we call it the St. Peter's fish. We think that's who one of Jesus' closest friends, he was a fisherman, Peter, probably caught most. Some homemade bread and some wine. Now in our teaching series that we're wrapping up today, by the way, Dining with Jesus, we've pointed out that eating and drinking were a really, really big deal to Jesus. In fact, we've even quoted throughout this series the noted Bible scholar Robert Karras, who says, listen, Jesus is he's either going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal. When you read the biographies of Jesus' life, that's what he does. He's just eating with people. And for Jesus, it wasn't so much about the food on the table and its extravagance or its expense. It was about the conversation that happened around the table. It was about the people he was sharing the meal with. Because the table, and we've said this throughout the series, while a really simple piece of furniture, its significance goes well beyond the food we put on it. And in week 1 of the series, we actually asked you to consider the question, what stories in your own life, what stories have played out in your life around a table, right? What stories have been told that you'll never forget? The news that has been shared that was life-changing, the decisions made, the relationships created, or maybe even the relationships healed. Because food served around a table has a way of connecting us. And for Jesus, the meals of Jesus are how he lived out grace and love. Essentially saying, if you want to know how I do life, watch me eat with people. Right? In fact, maybe we could say it like this. If you want to know what it looks like to live like Jesus, we should just watch how Jesus, he operates around a table. And that's really all this series has been, right? We've just wanted to sort of peek in on Jesus at dinner parties, at meals, and see what we can learn about how to live out of this way of love. And what's really interesting, and I just found this so interesting this week, Jesus, again, he's always like going to a meal, coming from a meal, at a meal. I mean, he's just eating and drinking all the time. But he's always being served the food. Except one time. There's one record of Jesus being the cook, where Jesus is the one preparing the meal and inviting others to join him. And that's the meal that I want us to look at today. That's the meal that I want us to wrap up our series with. And so let me set the scene for us. It's breakfast. Jesus is cooking breakfast, and it's actually the very last thing. This breakfast meal is the very last thing that gets recorded by arguably Jesus' best friend. His name was John. Now, at this point, when the breakfast is taking place, Jesus has already been tried for crimes against the state of the Roman Empire. He's been convicted. He's now been beaten. He's been made to carry his own cross up a small hill outside the city walls of ancient Jerusalem, where some Roman soldiers crucified him, nailed him to the cross. He dies. And after he's died, he's buried in a tomb that was owned by a buddy. And if you're new to Christianity, it's what happens next that really is everything. I mean, it's the whole thing of this Jesus bit, right? Jesus is raised back to life. After all of that, he comes back to life. Christians call it the resurrection, right? The resurrection, and we cannot overstate this. This is the anchor of the Christian faith. The foundation of Christianity is not doctrine. The foundation of Christianity is not belief. The foundation of Christianity is not a moral code or some way of behaving. No, the foundation of Christianity is an event. We believe something happened in history that changed everything. And that something is the resurrection. And it's after the resurrection, this breakfast takes place. And John, he tells us, he says, listen, I'm an eyewitness to the whole story. I've been there, I was there, and this is what happened. Myself and some buddies, we go fishing, terrible night fishing. We're out on that, remember I just mentioned the Sea of Galilee, this big lake. They're out on the Sea of Galilee fishing, terrible night. They're coming back in, it's the early morning hours. And they see Jesus on the shore. And he calls out to them, come on in, I've been making breakfast. Here's how John records the moment. The disciple whom Jesus loved, that's how John talks about himself, by the way. If you ever read John's biography of the life of Jesus, and you should, if you ever see that phrase, the disciple whom Jesus, that's John, he thinks really highly of himself. But that's why we kind of argue that maybe John was Jesus' best friend, right? John's sort of self-identifying as that, at least. The disciple whom Jesus loved, me, John, said to Peter, it's the Lord. Like, that's Jesus. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say it, it is the Lord. And this is another weird detail. He wrapped his outer garment around him, for he'd taken it up. What? Was he fishing naked? Or in his underwear? And actually, some translations have Peter naked, like he was out there all night fishing naked, which is just a really weird deal. But he thought, well, before I jump in, I should, put my suit back on. So he jumps in the water and swims to shore. Here's another interesting detail. The other disciples, they decide not to jump in and just to do what normal people do and take the boat to shore, right? Now, church tradition tells us that this moment is happening at a place called Tabgha. Now, Tabgha at the time of Jesus is a small but successful fishing village right on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. We're sort of looking at it from a hill behind it. That's what it kind of looks like today, overlooking the Sea of Galilee. And here's what takes place. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals. Now, I've underlined that for us because you need to put this in your memory. This is a very important detail that's going to come up in just a minute. So when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus had been cooking. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. Now, another interesting sort of detail. Early pilgrims to the Holy Land, making trips to Jerusalem and Israel, this is happening maybe like the 4th century, they identified a large rock on the shore where they believed this breakfast happened. In fact, they were so convinced they built a church on top of the rock, really around the rock. Here's what it looks like. If you go into the church, and you can today, there it is. That's the rock. They believe, or church tradition, legend tells us this breakfast happened. The Mensa Christi, right? The table of Christ. This is where Jesus says, come on over. I've been cooking breakfast. Have a bite with me. But here's the thing, and breakfast is great, and it's very cool that Jesus decided to cook. But the real, I think, impact of this meal happens after the eating part of the meal and the conversation that happens after the eating. They're still around the fire of burning coals, right? And it's there that Jesus decides to single out a guy named Peter. And he says, Peter, I want to talk to you for a moment. And to understand the power of this conversation, we actually have to look at another meal Jesus had just a couple days earlier, where he's with all the fellas, and they're having a meal that was actually going to be the last meal Jesus has before he's arrested, convicted, crucified. Today we call it the Last Supper, right? And Peter's there, and at this dinner, Peter declares out loud, Jesus, I'm with you no matter what. I would lay my life down for you, Jesus. You're the one, and I'm going to follow you wherever, whenever, prison, death. Let's do this. To which Jesus responds, are you sure? Are you sure? Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you. That's like the Bible way of saying, listen, before the rooster crows, you will disown me. He's talking to Peter. You will disown me 3 times. Like, Peter, great, but you're going to screw this up big time, right? And Jesus calls it. Jesus calls it. After Peter, so it's right after dinner, right? I mean, Peter's arrested, or Jesus is arrested. And then Peter, a few hours later, denies Jesus 3 times, right? And here's where that, remember the burning coals and fire, right, that they're around having breakfast? This is why it's so important. Peter blows it and denies Jesus 3 times around a fire of burning coals. Here's how it gets told. A servant girl on duty there brought Peter in. And she asks, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" She asked Peter. He replied, "Absolutely not. No way. That guy? Nope. The guy that just got arrested by the Roman government? I don't know him." It was cold. Here's the detail. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. Peter then is asked 2 more times. 2 more times. Listen, are you one of Jesus' friends? Are you with Jesus? And he denies it both times. Again, here's another just interesting detail that gets thrown in there. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there, warming himself. A charcoal fire is where Peter blew it, denies ever knowing Jesus, even though he'd been one of Jesus' closest friends and followers. He'd been all in. He denies him 3 times around a campfire. And now it's breakfast. It's a couple of days later. Jesus has risen from the dead. And again, Peter finds himself around a campfire. But this time, things go a little bit differently. Here's how John records the moment. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Well, then feed my lambs." Now that's kind of weird, so you're kind of not really a Bible person. Jesus often called himself a shepherd, like he was the good shepherd. And so that was this kind of imagery that got used a lot by Jesus. So lambs or sheep, right? These are people, right? These are people. Jesus said, "Feed my people. Take care of my people." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Well, then take care of my people." The 3rd time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Well, then feed my sheep. Go take care of my people." Now, a lot's going on in this exchange, right, between Jesus and Peter. But just really simply, there's 3 questions. There's 3 answers from Peter, followed by 3 challenges from Jesus. We made a chart for you. There it is, right? That's essentially what's happening. There's 3 questions. Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter's saying, yes, 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 and you should know, you know all things. You know I love you. Followed by 3 challenges from Jesus. Go take care of some people. Go love some people. Go do that. Go take care of some people. I love this interaction. Let me just kind of walk through this just quickly. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Here's what I love just about that one question. Jesus is making himself the vulnerable one. He's putting it out there on the line. He loves Peter, but he's wondering, "Peter, do you love me?" And he's waiting for the response. It's a serious place of vulnerability. And Peter's answer, "Well, yes, Lord," but he adds this disclaimer, right? He adds "You know that I love you." I think Peter doesn't fully trust his ability to assess his own heart. "You know everything, Jesus. Jesus, and you know I do the best I can. I do love you. When I'm in my right mind, I do. I want to. But if I'm honest, I don't really know the whole truth about my heart. But Jesus, you do." To which Jesus responds 3 times, "Go take care of some people. Go love some people." Now that we've got the relationship worked out, now that we kind of put it all on the table, so to speak, I want you to go and love and teach and guide my people. And don't miss this. Jesus is reminding us in this challenge, the most important thing to me is other people. I think in the church, oftentimes we want to make it about doctrine and, the right belief. And remember, we show our love for God by how well we love other people, not how smart we are and we know some fancy Bible words. Jesus doesn't say to Peter, go memorize the Bible. He says, go love some people. Go love some people. There's a question asked, a response is given, followed by a challenge, right? And this is important. Jesus isn't patting Peter on the back. Good job, you got the right answer. Sunday school, gold star. Right? No. He's saying, okay, great. If you do love me, here's the challenge, the commission. Go take care of some people, right? I want you, Peter, to share in my work of loving people. Go do that, right? This is repeated 3 times until Peter's offended. Jesus, why do you keep asking me this? And again, Peter's in the moment. We're 2,000 years later. We're looking back. John records it. He's kind of putting the meaning in there, right? All of this is happening. So we look back and we know what Peter doesn't know. That he is now, right in this moment, being healed by a Jesus who loves giving second chances. Remember, not once, but 3 times Peter stood by a fire and denied Jesus. And now, not once, but 3 times he stands by a fire and professes his love for Jesus. And 3 times Jesus says, awesome, glad we got that worked out. Now it's time to help me. I need you to go take care of some people. There's a story that's legendary in sort of the leadership business world, and it has to do with the IBM Corporation. And there's a story told about this promising young junior executive who's working for IBM, and he's involved in a very serious, risky venture for the company that winds up costing the company what would be today tens of millions of dollars in a gamble. And he knows, junior executive, he's done. Absolutely fried. He just cost the company tens of millions of dollars. So after this dramatic failure, he gets the call to come in to the founder, CEO, president of the board of IBM. His name's Tom Watson, Sr., absolute legend in the leadership and business world. Gets called into his office, and he knows, junior exec knows, this is it. Tom's going to, after he's done just ripping me apart, I'm fired, or he's going to ask for my resignation. That's what's going to happen. So he walks in, and he just preloads the conversation, this poor junior executive. Listen, I guess you've called me in to ask for my resignation, so here it is, I resign. And Tom, this is legendary. Tom Watson replies, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I just invested tens of millions of dollars educating you. I can't afford your resignation, right? I tell you that story because it just reminds me of this breakfast encounter, and really not just the breakfast encounter with Peter. See, by the time the breakfast encounter, Jesus and, Peter were around the fire. We got the, do you love me? Yes, I love you. Peter's got quite the reputation for big risks and blowing it big time. Big risk, gambling, throwing it all out there and screwing it up again and again. For example, there's this moment on that big lake, the Sea of Galilee, and a storm comes up and Jesus isn't with them. It's just Peter and the fellas. And all of a sudden they look out and Jesus is walking towards them. He's walking on the water. It's whoa, Jesus. And Peter gets so pumped about this, he jumps out of the boat and he's locked eyes with Jesus and he's walking on water. Storm kind of picks up, right? Some wind from, a different direction comes, whatever it is, and he freaks out. Peter takes his eyes off Jesus, got doubt and fear and all of that rushes in and he starts to sink and he'd drown if Jesus wasn't there, still walking on the water, and saves him from drowning. They both hop in to the boat. I can just imagine the conversation in the boat. Peter saying, you know what, Jesus, you're right about me. I'm big on dramatic gestures, but I'm low at the end of the day on faith and trust. I'm full of questions. I'm full of fear. And honestly, we just learned it doesn't take much to stop me. Little storm, a little wind, and I'm out. So Jesus, here's my resignation. To which I can hear Jesus saying, Peter, are you kidding me? I just invested a miracle in you. I can't afford your resignation. There's another time Peter and Jesus and the other guys are in a little town called Caesarea Philippi, and it's here that Peter makes this declarative statement. He just kind of throws it out there. Jesus, I believe you are the Jewish Messiah, the long-awaited one from God who has all the authority. And Jesus, you are the Son of the living God. And everyone's stunned. I mean, no one's really said that yet in the story of Jesus. And Jesus looks at Peter and says, oh, Peter, you didn't come up with that on your own. My heavenly Father revealed that to you. Peter, God told you that. It's dramatic. I mean, it's a very cool moment. Well, not long after, Jesus changes the conversation. Needs to remind his guys that he's about to die, that he's going to get crucified, that this is going to get worse before it gets better. And Peter is not having that conversation. And he just rejects it. We're told he rebukes Jesus, right? He's like, Jesus, what you can't talk like that. You're crazy. Like, shut up, Jesus. To which Jesus responds by calling Peter the devil. Yes. If Jesus calls you the devil, that feels like a bad day. Right? And I can just imagine, you know what, Jesus, you're right. You're right. I have a tendency. I speak impulsively. I put my foot in my mouth. Jesus, here's my resignation. Jesus saying, are you kidding me, Peter? I just invested divine revelation in you. Peter, I can't afford your resignation. And then, of course, the moment we've been looking at this morning, Peter says, Jesus, I'll die for you. He can't even keep that promise a few hours before he very dramatically denies Jesus 3 times. And then a couple days later, the breakfast happens on the beach, on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus, you're right about me all along. I failed you most completely when you needed me the most. I denied you. I abandoned you. Jesus, here's my resignation. To which Jesus says, Peter, are you kidding me? I just invested a resurrection in you. I can't afford your resignation. You know, I talked to lots and lots of people. Lots of people who used to be Jesus people. They quit the faith. And you know what oftentimes the story goes like? I screwed up. I messed up. It was a night. It was a weekend. It was a season. It was a whatever. And I don't know. I just stopped going to church, and I just quit. I felt like essentially I had to resign. They just forget the whole, are you kidding me? From Jesus. I've invested too much in you. I can't afford your resignation. Jesus doesn't run around firing people. We run around quitting on him, no? Because we think we're supposed to do it perfect. Maybe even our church experience convinced us we're supposed to do it perfect. And Jesus is like, what? Whoever said anything about perfect? How about honest? Right? Here at Neighborhood, we talk so much about, like, listen, what we can do together is just exponentially more than what any of us could do by ourselves. And so we need to be in this together. And oftentimes, I'm up here and I'm like, you got to get in the game. And if you don't serve on a ministry team here at Neighborhood, you need to talk to Jesus about that. And, right, we're like, go. We want you to help. We want you to serve. But it's really because what we want for you. Yes, together, we all need, this is a family. We need to kind of all be have a chore to serve and to help our community. Yes, get in the game. And you know how that story goes all the time. I mean, it's just the same for all of us. It's the same that it was for Peter. Jesus, here's what I hear from people who don't want to do it. I'm not qualified. You don't know who you're asking. Of course, if you knew my story, if you knew how naughty I was, if you knew how naughty I am, you would not be asking. I can't help at church. No way. I'm not a very good Christian. Apparently other people know what that means. I don't know what that means, right? But anyone who's ever done anything for Jesus, it's just the Peter story. It's all built on the same thing. Somewhere deep down, there's a love there for Jesus. And maybe you don't trust your heart fully just like Peter, but it's there. When you're in your right mind and you're, like, yes, Jesus, I'm here. But man, I've let you down plenty of times. And then Jesus saying, okay, now that we got that worked out, can you go take care of some people? Can you just go take care of some people? In a way that only you can. I need you. I can't afford your resignation. I'm invested too much in your story. I think Jesus says to Peter, and I think Jesus says to everyone who's ever stood by a fire and failed God, yeah, okay. Now that we got it worked out, we've had the chat, could you just please go take care of some people? We've got a lot of work to do. And I need your help. I can't afford your resignation. I've invested too much in getting you to right here. Jesus isn't going to fire you. I know. You think you're out. I think Peter's story, I think breakfast on the beach reminds us, you're not out. You're not out. At least not to Jesus. I can't afford your resignation. So can we please get back to work? Can I pray for us? Jesus, thanks. I just love breakfast on the beach. This story, it's so good. Just such a reminder that we're not the only ones that screw it up. We're not the only ones that have sort of metaphorically stood around the fire and abandoned you, and failed you, denied you. But you're this crazy Jesus who loves a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth chance, and on and on. He says, okay, let's talk about it. Let's get it worked out. Would you please go take care of some people? I cannot afford your resignation. We have too much work to do. Thanks for loving us like that, Jesus. Help us to love other people, to honor other people's stories the way that you honor ours. Jesus, it's in your name we pray. Amen.